So I ended up giving this 2 stars, but honestly I think that was quite generous. Hey friends, welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name is Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. And this is the first video that I'm filming in 2025. So how are you all? Did you have a good Christmas? Did you have a good New Year? I actually had quite a good Christmas and New Year. I was very surprised. Of course, this is the first Christmas that I've had without my dad, like the first proper Christmas, so thought things would be quite like negative, but definitely managed to put some sort of positive spin on it, so yeah. Feel that is satisfactory. However, in terms of my reading this year, I did not reach my reading goal. I was kind of close. So my reading goal for this year was 100 books. I read 92. I really did think at the end there with like a good sprint, I could have got it done. I read like a couple of novellas, which I'll tell you about in this video. And I just thought we can definitely do this. And I didn't, but that's okay. At the end of the day, reading is for enjoyment. It's not to hit a figure. It's not to hit a goal. It's nice to have a goal to kind of like encourage you and motivate you, but I'm very much under the impression I was not going to push that hard. So of course this is my last reading wrap up of the year. I will be putting a video out which is like my favourite books from the entire year, but this is still what I read in December. So you all know that I have struggled with Christmas thriller books for the longest time. I've never been able to find like one that I've really liked. They're all like detective series, or they're just more like mysteries, which you know I'm not really a massive fan of either, just not really my thing. However, the first book I'm going to tell you about got 4.5 stars and it's a Christmas thriller. So if you follow me on other platforms, you will of course know that it is Christmas Presents by Lisa Unger, and I absolutely love this. So it follows Madeline, who 10 years ago her best friends went missing / were unalived. I just can't really remember, to be honest, but she's basically like living life now, kind of like in the shadow of all of that. And then a true crime podcaster comes to town and is like, I want to get to the bottom of this. So basically think Listen for the Lie, but Christmas. I really liked in this, there's quite a lot of like running themes. So our female main character works in a bookshop and she'd find these like notes in some of the books. She got these Christmas presents every year and she didn't know who they were from. Like this was like quite well grounded. It also opened with a different perspective than the main story was told from, and I really liked this girl at the start of the book. I was like, I opened it and she's like a dancer in a club and this guy comes in and tries to speak to her and she was just so sassy and badass. And then the POV switched and I was like, oh man, I liked her. So if you ever watch this Lisa Unger, if you want to write her story, I would read that. So definitely make a note of this one for next year. I'm probably going to get a paperback or hardback copy for my shelves because I really liked it. Then I read The Housemaid's Wedding by Frida McFadden, and this is of course part of the Housemaid series. So this is intended to fill the gaps between book 2 and book 3 because it's about a 10-year jump. So it's giving you a bit more insight into like Millie and Enzo's life, but it was literally only 70 pages and I was just kind of there like, I'm not really sure what Frida was trying to achieve with this. Like, I get from a commercial point of view, anything with like the housemaid on it, people are going to want to read it, but I feel like if this was fleshed out as a full book, it could have worked, but it just didn't. For the sake of this, it just didn't. So I ended up giving this 2 stars, but honestly I think that was quite generous. I gave 1 star because I was like, that was super easy to read. I read it in about 10 minutes. And another star because you got like the backstory behind Ada's name, which I really liked. Then I read the 3rd book in the DC Fionn Morgan series, which is Other People's Houses by Claire McIntosh, and this doesn't come out until February, and I was very lucky that I managed to get an advance copy. So of course we're following Fionn and Leo again, and they both have their respective crimes to solve. One of them is investigating a woman who was found unalived in an upturned kayak, bit rogue, and the other one is investigating a series of burglaries in like a really wealthy street in Cheshire. But as they always do, these cases somewhat entangle and they end up working together anyway. I feel like Fionn and Leo are just so brilliant. I'm so invested in these characters as opposed to the plot. Like the plot was good as well, don't get me wrong, but having read The Last Party and Game of Lies, I'm just so invested in them. I was like on the edge of my seat like, please be okay. I was so worried to read this book in case anything happened to Fionn and Leo that I actually asked Claire McIntosh at an event. I was like, am I gonna be okay to read this? And she was like, yeah, you're gonna be okay. So then I read Murder on the Christmas Express by Alexandra Benedict. I also read The Christmas Murder Game a couple of years ago by this author and wasn't a huge fan of that. But I was working with a brand and I thought I'm going to give this another go and just see if I like it. So the concept is that 18 passengers are stranded on a train that's going from London, somewhere in England, up to Scotland for Christmas, like on a sleeper train. But then people start being unalived, you see, and then that's why like the actual mystery comes in. You would think from this cover that this was like a cozy, like you just would. I didn't go into it thinking thriller. I still don't think it's thriller. However, there was definitely some darker themes in this, which I don't think you would anticipate from the cover or from like the synopsis. So there were some good bits. I did enjoy like the classic train mystery spin, especially around Christmas. That was really good. But some of these characters' voices were just a bit... And I think the darker topics along with like the lighter mystery element was just a bit like opposing. However, the Christmas and the winter vibes were definitely there in this book, so if that's what you're after, this one could probably work for you. Then I read a brilliant Christmas novella by Peter Swanson, The Only Guest. The Christmas Guest. So this follows a student who goes to her classmate's house before Christmas, and she has this massive like manor in the Cotswolds, and she's feeling so grateful. She's like, wow, didn't know this friend liked me so much. Like, we're gonna have a great Christmas. It's brilliant. So she goes over. Things get like a little bit sinister. Like, things just don't add up. Like, there's a weird vibe, and she starts fancying her brother, and it's a bit like, girl, this is a thriller book. I don't think that's going to end well. So this was told initially in diary entries, which really pulls you in and worked really, really well, because you kind of skip through the boring bits when it works in diary entries. I really thought this was going to go a different way than it did, and I loved how it wrapped up at the ending. So definitely add this one to your list for next Christmas as well. Then the next book I have super mixed opinions on. I still can't really get my thoughts together on this, but it is Dying for Christmas by Tammy Cohen. So this follows Jessica, who goes home with this guy she's just met in a department store cafe, decides to go back to his for a drink. I mean, it's Christmas Eve, babes, I get it, but still. So she gets there and she really quickly realises she's in like a hostage kidnap situation, and she's like, oh my God. This was very dark. So it's split into two parts. The first part, very dark, almost started to get a bit too much even for me, like, and almost like a bit repetitive, like the dark bits were unnecessarily repeated, if that makes sense. Then it switched to part two, and I was like, now I can get on board. Definitely can get on board now. But by the time it got to that, I was already kind of losing interest, so I feel like that needed to come a lot sooner. At the end as well, there's also a few bits that weren't tied up, so while I did enjoy it, if it wasn't Christmas themed, I probably wouldn't recommend it, if that makes sense. Like, have it on your radar for Christmas next year, but also like, wouldn't be the first book I'd reach for. And the final book that I read in December is 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth. I've had this on my radar since like Christmas last year, because it follows this woman who gets dumped by her boyfriend, and she's just like depressed. She's with her friends, they've had a few glasses of wine. She downloads like Hinge or Tinder or something, and she sees his boss on there, and she's like, match, let's do it. She ends up going out with him, and that's like the premise of the book, and I was just like, yeah, like that just sounds like a bit of me, do you know what I mean? However, you can imagine that got very complicated very quickly, and of course this is a romance book, it's not a thriller, so nothing like super sinister happens. It was like my palate cleanser of December, and I did enjoy it, I did. It just wasn't, it didn't have that like magic in it for me. It was a good book, it was well written, but it's just not an Abby Jimenez, is it? I feel like now I've read a few more romance books, the bar's been set a little bit too high. When I hadn't really read many, like every romance book was like, oh wow, yeah, that was a great palate cleanser. Now I've probably read 20 plus. I'm flagging. So those, how many did I read? Those were the 7 books that I read in December. As I say, did not reach my reading goal, but I'm really happy with what I read in 2024. Let me know what your favourite reads of December are. I need to like make a mental note for some good Christmas reads for next year as well. Also, if you haven't already checked it out, I'm of course in my new library, which I'm so excited about. This is one of the first videos that I have filmed since I've got everything set up. I have a 2-part video series, I guess, on like the whole library setup, moving everything, how I've arranged everything, which was so exciting to film and is now live. If you would like to go and see that, I'll pop a link at the end. So for now, I can't wait to see you next time. Is that right? Be fine.